Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Linux Dev Time. I'm Joe.
I'm Omelith.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Andy.
Good to talk to you all again. So today I thought we'd have a bit of fun. I want to hear your development hot takes. So Kevin, go first. What's one of your development hot takes?
Number one hot take is the rewrite it in Rust, RIIR, is not a thing. I know it's a meme. I know people talk about it, but I've seen so much more talk about the meme than actually seeing people like jump into random projects and say, hey, have you considered rewriting this in Rust? Or asking people to rewrite their own projects in Rust. I've just never, ever seen that. And I've been in the Rust community for greater than 10 years now. I can't think of a single time where I've seen someone genuinely jump into a random project and say, hey, you like adamantly demand that somebody else rewrite their project in Rust. I don't think it's a thing. I think it's a meme. I think it's a thing that goes around the internet and people like talking about it. People like saying how terrible it is. I don't think it really happens.
I did see someone on Mastodon the other day claim that someone had done it to them.
Oh, I see lots of people claim that they've seen it and they claim that it's terrible and it's super annoying and they hate when people do it to them. But no one can point me to like links of someone actually coming in and saying, hey, this project I've never been associated with, I want you to spend all of your time rewriting these hundreds of thousands of lines in Rust. I've never seen that happen ever.
I think people do it down the pub.
Oh, I'm sure it happens like as a joke. And I'm sure that there are people confusing things like people who actually own the project discussing, hey, should I rewrite this in Rust? Or other people that are closely contributing to the project saying, hey, what if we consider Rust? What if we consider going to a modern C++? There's all kinds of things that people suggest. I don't think that the rewrite it in Rust movement is really a thing that like people say it is in a meme.
I do know that has happened on Twitch to some streamers.
Right, but is that just like a troll hopping into a chat room, like an anonymous username saying, hey, rewrite your project in Rust? Like, I don't think that's a thing.
Quite possibly.
Right, so you're saying it's a meme and people make jokes about it and people might troll with it, but you're saying that no one has seriously suggested it.
I'm not going to say no one on the face of the planet. I'm going to say pragmatically no one on the face of the planet has done that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen people who run projects taking it upon themselves to completely redo their thing in Rust and enjoying it and reporting back on the experience. But that's a whole different thing, obviously.
Right, I think Fish is an example of that. There's several projects that have undergone things like that.
Well, and we've seen it with the kernel as well, where there's additional bits being written in Rust.
And that's not to say, too, that there is not like some form of animosity or, people that are not okay with that sort of a switch. And I think that's an okay thing I think it's okay to have those debates. I think reasonable people can disagree on these types of things. However, I just don't think that the meme of it is a real thing.
There is a religious fervor that comes with Rust development, right? Like I feel it myself. I get so excited about it that I could accidentally cause someone some pain, maybe.
But I think the same thing happens with other languages as well. People just that get excited about certain things or even paradigms of programming, you'll see people come at it with almost a religious fervor. And I don't know, I think that's also down to like half the time these things are communicated via text, and text is hard. It's really hard to communicate emotion and all this over, such a terrible medium.
But it's not just development where that happens, it's all of tech.
Yeah.
Vim versus Emacs.
It's fortunate that we finally won that battle.
Mm-hmm.
I started reading Real World Haskell to my son for his bedtime story last night. And that starts with a big bit about how Haskell is like the best thing ever. So it's even in our books.
I love that you're reading your kid bedtime stories about Haskell.
Well, we've just finished Practical Vim, so we had to find something else.
Oh, of course.
That's child abuse, man. What's wrong with like the kick away shoes and stuff like that?
Mine has more to do with maintenance than development. My hot take is that proper, detailed documentation about how to do the thing manually, whatever it is, if it's like setting up a self-hosted instance of something or some sort of development project, the detailed documentation should come first, and then the one-liner, whatever it is, should come after. Because whatever method you've chosen for that one-liner might not work for everyone. But the detailed documentation will, because they can decide, all right, this piece I'm going to deviate in this area because my infrastructure is slightly different in this way.
So you're saying that curl pipe to bash should be underneath the documentation?
I don't know about the ordering. I think in terms of like priority of writing, before you do whatever that curl script automation is, before you write that, write the documentation down first.
Right, but it's okay to have that be top of the get started with maybe a link that scrolls you down to the more detailed documentation.
Maybe, sure. I think there are arguments against curling stuff and piping to bash in general.
Well, yeah, it should be sudo.
Sure.
I have a slight question about this. So I will quite often document things by writing like bash for it. And I tend to find that if you write a bash script well, a simple bash script well, it reads a bit like detailed documentation. So I'm wondering whether I get away with that. And what I want to contrast it with is a lot of projects these days which say, in order to hack on this, you just need to install this Flatpak, or you need to use this Docker image. And that I feel is really bad because it kind of hides away the details completely. I'm hoping that you'll let me get away with my bash script.
I think there was a key word in there, a simple bash script. It should be readable and understandable. I've seen some ridiculously convoluted 1,000-line install scripts. None of those. Those are bad.
What if they're fully commented, though?
Maybe, but whoever is going to install it still has to be able to understand and fit that entire script within their head. They have to come up with a mental model of it. And if they're not super experienced with bash, maybe that huge script will be too much.
I think it's that it comes down to intent. Like you want to have somebody explain the intent behind some of the commands or the documentation, because that's where I've seen it struggle a lot before is people say, hey, throw in all these different commands and they might have a reason for why they did it, but they don't explain that. And then it just kind of becomes a cargo cult thing that everyone's like, oh, we just put these commands in because that's what makes the green light turn on. So being able to say like, hey, these commands were put in for this reason or in order to fix this thing or to do whatever it is, that's when it lets the person reading it decide, oh, do I have that same environment? Do I need to do that? Or do I need to tweak it because my environment's actually a little bit differently? So I need to remove that command or change it or whatever.
Exactly. That's a better way of putting it.
I feel like we should ask ourselves, why is there this complex setup process, right? And maybe we should write our software so it doesn't need it.
Well, it seems to me that your hot take, Amalith, is documentation is generally not very good.
When there is documentation, it tends to be okay. More often, I see just a complete lack of installation documentation. It's just, here's the Docker Compose thing, run this, and that's it.
Yeah, I should have said the state of documentation is not very good, maybe.
I do feel like Docker in particular has this problem that it really obfuscates everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's used as a multi-tool. It's used as something to not only solve like packaging issues, but to solve environment setups. It's used as like this multi-layer thing as a deployment pipeline. So when you combine all of that stuff into one tool, you end up with this just conglomerate of no one really knows what's going on. Or the people that do aren't the ones that wrote the documentation, and it just turns into a mess because you're trying to use one thing. You're trying to use a hammer for everything.
What about you, Andy? My understanding is you have quite a list, so you'll have to prioritize the most important ones.
Okay, here's my top hot take. You only need one monitor.
Blasphemy.
So let me explain. We have very good tooling in our computers these days to switch a virtual desktop to the next thing that you're going to focus on. It's less effort to type the keyboard shortcut to switch your virtual desktop than to move your head. It will do less harm to your body than sitting with your head turned, or I dread to think looking up at some monitor above your monitor. What is that about? And you can't look at two things at once. You only need one monitor.
Maybe I have smaller monitors, or maybe I just have chameleon eyes, but I don't feel like I move my head that much.
If you sit there with your head turned typing, you will get RSI.
That I agree with.
Your keyboard is there. Position it in front of your monitor. You're nicely lined up. You've got as many virtual desktops as you want. Why would you need another monitor?
Specifically, I want another monitor so I can keep up with chat in a particular group. That's all I want on that particular monitor. And then I want the main stuff I'm doing right here in front of me. And then when I want to reply to something that's going on in one of those chat rooms, maybe I pick up my nice wireless keyboard and turn and type that in. Or maybe I just move it over to my main monitor with 2 keystrokes.
You're young, Amalith. Your body is going to punish you for this later.
I used to want multiple monitors, and then I started using i3, and my desire for multiple monitors evaporated the more I got used to the tiling workflow with the virtual desktops and all that stuff. Then the desire for another monitor came back when I started needing to monitor chat more often, because there are just too many messages for me to have notifications on all the time, but I still want to be able to glance over every now and then and get a rough idea of what's happening.
Yeah, I think much like Amalith, I use a reference monitor. I have a tiling window set up on my main monitor, and that's where I'll have multiple virtual desktops. Everything's kind of tiled left and right. That's great. And I'll switch back and forth. I can even do that on the laptop just fine. No issues. But I do really like having a reference monitor off to the side where I can have either chat, maybe documentation, maybe if I have to be in a Zoom meeting for whatever reason. But having that reference monitor off to the side, which is just there to kind of take the pressure off me flipping back and forth between virtual desktops, which is not terrible. But I think that little extra monitor, that it helps me at least.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by people who support us with PayPal and Patreon. Go to linuxdevtime.com/support for details of how you can support us too. Patreon supporters have the option to listen to episodes without ads like this. And it's not just this show. There's Late Night Linux for news, discoveries, audience input, and misanthropy, 2.5 admins about system administration, Linux Matters for upbeat, family-friendly adventures, Linux After Dark for silly challenges and philosophical debates, Hybrid Cloud Show for everything private and public cloud, and Ask the Hosts for off-topic questions from you. You can even get some episodes a bit early. We've got a lot going on, and it's only possible because of the people who support us. So if you like what we do and can afford it, it would be great if you could support us too at linuxdevtime.com/support.
All right, so the next hot take would be, I think that counting the number of dependencies is not a problem. I.e., you could call this like micro packages are fine. Although I think if we go all the way into like the NPM style micro packages, one-line functions, that's ridiculous. I'll admit that. However, I think dividing code up into small modules and those being independently distributed, I think that's a great thing. And I think counting the number of dependencies on a project is a silly thing to fret about. Now, what you should care about is probably like your compile times and code size, but that to me is all independent of the number of dependencies. I see so many people just chase the number of dependencies, like, oh, this is a no dependency project, or it's a 2 dependency project. But however, that doesn't even capture, like, are these dependencies first class? Are they made by the same people that the original thing is made by? There's so many other things to count. And I think just going after like the number of packages or number of dependencies is such a silly thing for us to like code golf down that shouldn't even be worried about.
I mean, you should be worried about the quality of your dependencies, right?
Oh, 100%, yes.
So it's hard to keep track of the quality of your dependencies if the number is large, but maybe we should be talking about the number of developers who wrote your dependencies.
That's why I think the number is actually a proxy for all these other things that do matter. However, the number is a really bad proxy for that. Like the quality, absolutely. Code size, compilation time, all of these things are things you absolutely should care about. The bus factor on how many people can inject code, or how many people would have to go away before the code stops working. Like there's all kinds of things that you should care about, which number of dependencies does contribute to. However, I just think it's a really, really bad proxy for all those things that you probably should care about.
I think I would argue if you're down to like below 5 because you're like a high security project, I feel like it's fair enough, right? Like, because you're basically saying, I've audited all of my dependencies. But if you're up near 100, I totally agree. 100 or 200 is totally meaningless. It basically means I haven't audited all my dependencies.
I also wonder too, like there are plenty of projects I've seen that, they'll refuse to take on a dependency and they either A, just rewrite it themselves in their own code. So there's no dependency. However, it might be written worse,
badly,
might be maintained worse. It might be, maybe it's some crypto stuff that, absolutely should not be written by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. So that's what I'm saying. Like chasing the number of dependencies can also go the other way badly.
Also, like if it ever encouraged people not to make use of the power of all that code that's out there to get stuff done, that would be another reason why I'd object to this. Like I think it depends on the project. Some projects, you need to really worry about the quality of your dependencies and auditability and all that. And some projects, you just get stuff done and all that code is out there for you to use. So use it.
And let the people that have like solved the edge cases already, reuse that knowledge, reuse that code versus trying to think you can do it yourself. I don't know. To me, that it seems like hubris to say like, I'm just going to redo everything myself.
So much fun though.
Oh, it is a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong.
All right. So here's my next hot take. Light mode is good too.
I agree.
100 emoji. is all I can say to that. Yes. Dark mode just looks terrible. It's very, very hard to do dark mode well.
What's the opposite of the 100 emoji? Like the negative 100 emoji? That's what I'm putting. Dark mode everything.
So I'm of the generation where the generation before me only got to use black monitors with green writing on, right? So when I was coming up in computers, it was incredibly exciting that you could have stuff that looked like a piece of paper or something like that. And so everyone went for light mode everything. And then the generation after me are all like, oh, we're proper hackers, so everything's black screen. Oh, it's easier for my eyes. And for some people, I'm sure it is much easier for their eyes, right? But for the whole proper hacker thing, like make use of different themes. So here's how I work. I have most of my life in light mode. And then when I'm writing code, I'm on a black terminal with green writing. And it's so good because then I know I'm a hacker.
Yeah, I was about to say, please don't tell me your terminal is white. Like, that is just wrong. It has to be black and green.
I think it would be wrong to use NeoVim on a white screen.
Do you use the cool retro term as well?
I don't know. I find that stuff that makes it harder to see stuff for fun, I find that objectionable.
But if you're just reading an article or some documentation or something, that has to be just black text on a white background. Thank you very much.
Yeah, why not?
Because my eyeballs, it scalds them. Whenever you switch out of like a dark mode and you get hit with the website that is always light mode or for whatever reason your theme changes, it's jarring. Like borderline physically painful to switch to something like that.
So I've been feeling really bad about that. I've had a WordPress blog for 19 years. I'm not sure I was on WordPress the whole of that, but for most of that, it's been on WordPress. And for a number of reasons, I've decided that it's finally time for me to switch. And my new blog is going to have switchable themes, and it's going to listen to your desktop dark or light mode. And I'm very sorry to everyone who's had to put up with it until now.
I will concede, though, there are plenty of bad dark modes. There are plenty of places where you go to read it in dark mode, you just can't. And you have to switch to a light mode just to make it readable. So I'll concede that at least.
My choice of light versus dark is based entirely on how much ambient light there is in wherever I am at the time. And I switch my desktop, my editor, my terminal. I try and automate as many applications as I can to switch between light and dark with a single command to make it as easy as possible.
I definitely find at night when I'm using a light mode thing, I want the redshift going so that it's dimmed a bit.
Oh, yeah. I just have that all the time. I just never want a blue screen,
right.
You know, a blue tint to the screen. I just want an orangey, yellow color just at all times.
Well, the great thing about human eyes, too, is like once you get used to that, you can't tell until you turn it off. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what is that? All right. So what about this one? This is going to talk about packaging. I think distro package repositories are the wrong way to go in 2024.
Wrong.
That is a spicy take.
Wrong. So what, you're all in on Flatpak, essentially?
Oh, absolutely not. No, you know what? Actually, I'm going to take that back. I don't think that the distro package repositories, like the idea of something like that is necessarily wrong. I think the way that they are currently implemented leads to other issues down the road. So I would prefer for everything to be like more pure upstream vanilla source, which would make you think like, oh, why don't I just run Arch on everything?
Yep.
But I think it's maybe something more like a ports tree would be better, closer to what I'm thinking. And I don't want to bring that up because that's a whole other ball of wax and it's super complicated. So I don't mean that, but I mean like the way that distro repositories are set up right now just leads to other issues in 2024 and the way things are packaged. It's much harder to do static linking. I think it's an older way of doing things, and I don't have the right answer for how something would be done better. So this is one where I'm just going to complain about it with no solution. But I think in 2024, there are probably better ways to do software packaging than distro repositories.
Like what?
So I don't like how a lot of packages, there will be different things that the maintainer either like turns on or turns off or like makes decisions for the user, which I got it. Some of those decisions, people are like, that's why I use distro X, is because I trust the maintainers to make the good decisions. Mm-hmm. However, I think that also goes against what the upstream developer sometimes intended. Sometimes it goes in a way like entirely different and it causes issues with the upstream software. So I wish it was a little bit more vanilla. I think there's also things too with like just the way people trust distro packages far more than I believe is probably warranted.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people think that distro packages, like someone's combing through all the lines of code to like fix all the CVEs and find all the security bugs and everything. Like I just don't think that happens. That might happen for some packages, some like very high visibility packages, but I don't think that happens in the large scale. So I just think there's a lot of like misplaced trust in the way that it's done. And that's because of the way they're like, oh, it comes from my distro, it should be good. Meanwhile, some of it is just like best effort thrown in there, packaged with some sort of package script, and that's it. So I don't know. There's just a lot of things that I don't think distro packages are the way to go.
I'm hearing a lot of it shouldn't be this, it shouldn't be that. But I asked you about Flatpak. You said no to that. I asked you, what's your solution? You don't have one then.
Oh, no, I'll admit I don't have a solution to this. And Flatpak, the reason I was saying I don't know is Flatpak is still kind of a where somebody is taking upstream software, doing some stuff to it and trying to package it. I think it is closer to what I'm thinking of as in like more vanilla upstream, just pure from the developer. But it's still got a little bit of the like distro packager flavor to it as well. So I don't know. I don't have a solution here. I don't have the right answers. This is just me like thinking off the top of my head.
Right. So Snap then, that's the answer.
It sounds to me like what you want is sort of like the Android app Obtainium. You can point it at a GitHub repo and it will just look for the releases, find a release artifact, download it, and install it. That is the direct build right from the developer's source.
Yeah, maybe something like that. But for Linux, again, I don't really have all the answers because I know that there's downsides to that too. I know that that is just going to ask for security issues. At the same time, like I said just a minute ago, I don't think that a lot of these packages receive the exact security, fine-tooth comb that people think that they get. So I don't know. Maybe it'd be better. Maybe it'd be worse. I really don't know.
It's still a buffer though. They might not be going through and, finding CVs like you said, but there is still a buffer between developer and user. And that model has worked for 30 years or, 20 plus years.
I think that buffer could just be time though, too. Like think of something like the AUR and Arch where you have something that just comes straight from, Git main, and you'll have comments on there. Hey, this doesn't work for whatever reason, or this is bad. Maybe there's a time delay buffer like of a week before. I don't know. Again, I don't have the answers.
As someone who's recently moved to Debian and is very happy with that move, I definitely have comments on this. I think that Debian has this incredible, magical ability to make being a packager a cool thing to do instead of just being a horrific burden. And so they've got all these volunteers who do this work. And I agree, some of it is very little oversight and some of it is a decent amount of oversight. But you do see security fixes going into Debian. I do generally trust those packages to understand how the operating system is put together and therefore what the best way is to bring this piece of software to you. But I also see myself needing up-to-date versions of a very select set of packages. And very distressingly to me, I've used app images for several of them because that was the best option for me, which I really don't like the idea of that because they don't always keep themselves up to date. So I wish that either Flatpak or Snap, maybe I should try them properly, but I used to use Snaps on Ubuntu and I'm glad that I don't anymore because they always seem to have problems.
Well, between Snap, Flatpak, and DistroBox, you can pretty much get anything running that you need to.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's part of what is making me think along these lines too, is there's so many ways to get software now, and there's a million different ways to do things. But being that you don't purely have to go through a distro's package repositories now for a lot of software is what's making me think like, maybe there are other ways we could do this too.
Well, we better wrap it up, but it feels like you lot have got a lot more hot takes in you, and I'm sure that the audience have got some. So do email them in, show@linuxdevtime.com, and maybe we might do a part 2 of this at some point soon. But we'll be back next week. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Amalith.
I've been Kevin.
And I've been Andy.
See you later.